Okay, so we'll start the session. Hello everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank all of you for taking the time out from your busy schedule joining in today. With me today, I have Shobit Mathur. Shobit has over 15 years of experience in terms of investing. In fact, he joined the Kotak Mahindra Bank in 2008 and then moved to Kotak Optimist Investment Advisor to basically set up their investment team. So within the group, he has over 13 years of experience and working as a director. So he's IIT and he's also MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur. So what we're going to discuss about is certain things. One, we majorly want to focus on asset allocation, and the key to successful investing can be summed up in two parts, which is asset allocation. So we want to dwell upon, and deep dive into, how Shobit looks at asset allocation and all that. So Shobit, firstly, I would like to thank you for joining the call today and agreeing to speak to our investors.
Yeah, thanks, Akash. The pleasure is of mine.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do is, what we do is essentially, Shobit, at AIF and PMS Experts India, we keep organizing these knowledge-based sessions, and whole idea is to educate and empower every investor, especially in this category of investment, which is asset allocation, or which is more into equity investing. Most of the investors are not so familiar with, with I would say domain expertise in terms of how do they enhance their overall return. Because, for example, at this point of time, when market valuations are looking expensive, people are in two minds whether they should book profits, come out of equities, or they should be remain invested, or they should follow the asset allocation discipline. So we want to learn more from you what would be the right advice. So the format of the show is very simple. I'm going to ask you some questions on behalf of our investors. So some of them have already type in their questions to me, and some certain questions I would be asking on their behalf. And then post this conversation, we'll open the forum for Q&A. If anybody is interested, they can ask any questions. So they can type in their questions in Q&A box.
Yeah.
So coming back to the first point. So because you've been instrumental in terms of setting up this Kotak Optimist, so I'm not going to talk about that much, but certain basic questions to begin with. So you've been in this industry for, as I said, more than 15 years. So I would say closer to 2 decades, and then you've been part of the investment advisory of Kotak, where then you were kind of instrumental in terms of advising more than 250 large ultra HNI families of India. So how has been your experience in terms of advising those clients, and what has been their approach, and do you think that approach has changed of late? What do you?
So, because I think the way the markets have evolved in India, starting from way back 20 years when mutual funds were relatively new, to now we have a dedicated show from you on AIFs and PMSs. I think generally chaos has only increased for investors. There are so many different options to choose from, and there are so many different variables. We no longer have to just depend on what's happening in India. People need to keep an eye on what's happening in US, what's happening in China, how commodities are moving, how currency markets are moving. So I think it's become more and more difficult. And the trend that we have seen investors follow is investors have started to depend more and more on advisors like us to take those investment decisions. And there also, I would try to paint you a picture of how investors have gone about doing that. Is investors have started to appoint advisors so that they can help them manage their asset allocation in a more principled manner. And I think people have started to follow what we call as a portfolio approach rather than a product approach. So individually, earlier people would come to us asking for advice on specific individual product ideas. Today, people come to us to ask us for advice at a full portfolio level. I think that's a very important change and shift, and that's what we think is a big directional shift for the market.
So, Shobit, what is this discretionary wealth management? Because and how it is shaping up both in India and globally? I know globally it began long back, but how is the trend shaping up in India?
So, to give you background of what discretionary wealth management is, I would just maybe first give you the background of how it came into existence. So earlier, as I was talking to you in the previous point, people were focused more on individual products. Then people said we want advice on the full portfolio. Advice can also be further subdivided into two categories. One is investors can say, advise me, and I'm going to make decisions on the advice that you give me. I'm going to still be the final decision maker of those investments. And two, investors can say, look, you be my advisor and you take all the investment decisions on my behalf. You may want to understand what profile I am, what kind of expectation of returns I have, what kind of risk return I am looking at. But after that, I will leave the decision making of where to invest, what to invest, and how to invest in your hands. And the second part of advice, where investors completely give the decision making to their advisors, is what is started to get called as discretionary wealth management.
So it is a discretion of their wealth manager to decide based on their own domain expertise and the knowledge that they have. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So in a way, it is. I would say it is a better approach because most of the time investors don't have access to the complete balance sheets of the company, whereas these advisors would kind of sort of work very closely with these portfolio managers and or with these companies directly and have access to those companies and their balance sheet and can provide more inputs and data. So one is that you have sort of in feeling and intuition that markets may fall or may go up. On the other way, you have a methodical approach of looking at everything. So wonderful. That's a new trend. So do you think that this trend is now emerging in India? Because generally in India, the trend is that people want good advice, but they don't want to pay for it.
No, so that's one thing, Vikas, which is interesting that this is not something which is unique to India. This has been a trend globally. And I think globally investors have started to realize that when they want to make these discretionary wealth managers manage part of their portfolio, it takes away a large part of decision making, large part of headache of day-to-day operation away from them. To give you some kind of insight, markets like US, UK, Singapore, these numbers have crossed as much as 70% of investors' portfolios being managed by their wealth managers in a discretionary manner. Of course, in Asia and more particularly in India, we are following in those footsteps, but I think it's not far that more and more of client portfolios are going to get managed by their discretionary wealth managers. It's a new way of life for portfolios which has started to come into existence. And with that, and with performance following what and how investors have seen returns being delivered by such kind of discretionary wealth management platforms, investors are also willing to pay the fee that it entails. But mind you, since these discretionary platforms also are offered to multiple investors through one single institutional framework, they also provide benefits of cost to those investors. So no longer do investors need to pay for the same cost which they had to pay if their individual portfolio were to be managed by individual wealth manager. Here there are benefits of size and scale, which mean that investors are getting the benefit of lower cost as well.
Yeah, and I think it's very important that if somebody brings that kind of expertise on the table and able to manage the overall risk, then why not? I mean, gone are those days when I remember I used to do conferences and seminars in 2008, 9 times. I remember, and post the presentation, they used to come to me and ask me, "Koi tip de do, koi idea de do." So gone. I'm talking about all HNIs and ultra HNI investors. Nothing right and wrong about it. This is how it began. But I'm glad to know that now the way it is shaping up is that investors have also realized, with their own experience as they have grown over a period of time, is that if they take help of advisors, registered investment advisors who have expertise, one, their risk is managed properly and there's a methodical way of looking at and analyzing the risk parameter of every individual client. And then over a period of time, it would help you to enhance the return. So certainly, I think you guys are doing great job. So congratulations from our end. So next question is, the Shobit, is that, as I said at the beginning, markets are going up, and this is the time when investor community as a whole also becomes little greedy कि थोड़ा और equity में पैसा बन जाएगा रहने दो. But how do you think this two powerful word which is called asset allocation, how do you sum up that?
So, because I will give you an example here, and it's a very simple example. As you said, I've been in this industry for 15 plus years, and I keep getting this question whenever I meet investors. People ask this typical question: "Market का क्या लग रहा है?" And you know, we keep telling people that it is not so important as to what we feel market is going to deliver in the next 6 months, 12 months. If I were to draw a corollary, imagine yourself driving on a road and imagine someone else just zooms past you in a fast car. You don't suddenly start to chase that car. Of course, people who do know where it could end up, but you need to follow what speed at which you want to go and you know where you want to go. So that's the concept of asset allocation, that when you look at different asset classes, there are years in the past when we have studied that gold was the best performing asset class. There have been years where you would have been best if you kept your money in a bank account. And of course, there are years like 2020 or 2021 when markets give you superlative returns and you feel that I have missed the bus. But having said that, I think these winners keep rotating year on year. And it's very important for investors to keep their portfolios diversified. And which is the whole concept of asset allocation, that you don't try to over allocate to one particular asset class given the returns that you have seen in the last 6 months, 12 months. You keep trying to balance your portfolio in multiple asset classes. And of course, be mindful that whenever markets will move in such fast speed, one of those asset classes will suddenly increase in value in your portfolio. And those are times where it is very important for you to rebalance your portfolios, bring it back to the original asset allocation, and it will always ensure that you are buying low and selling high, because every time markets will fall, that particular asset class will look lower in value in your portfolio and you will buy to bring it back to the neutral level. And every time the markets will take, for example, in current markets, equity go up 100%, your allocation to equity would have gone beyond what you are comfortable taking a risk on that asset class too. So you should always be booking profits to bring it back down and not think about what's going to do well in the next 3 months, 6 months.
Yeah, but there is this sort of perception, Shobit, amongst investor communities that asset allocation means 50-50 or 50-25 or like that, or maybe 25 in gold, 25 in fixed income, 15 in equities. Now, how does this rebalancing work? For example, specifically, if you look at the equity trend in India for next 5 years, looks extremely good. I mean, coming from the suppressed earning of almost a decade, now next 10 years looks to be good. Now, there are two school of thoughts. One is that you reduce your equity and come back to, suppose your original allocation in equity was 50%, so you come back to 50%. Or the other way is that because markets are good, your advisor is advising you that you can have now 65% overall allocation within equity. So, how does it work? Can you throw some more lights on that?
Yeah. So there, because again, it's very important for people to know what is that right asset allocation that they should stick to, and not change that asset allocation because market delivered better return. That I think is the starting point that I would advise. And I think how to determine that asset allocation is an art. Sometimes people use very casual conversations to say today I am 50, let me be 60 or 70. But it is going to boil down to how much risk you are willing to stomach when markets are going to go up and down, especially down. And you can do that simple exercise by taking yourself back, since we had a huge COVID-led fall in the market, taking yourself back to say 1st of March 2020 and say, if this was my allocation and market fell 35%, will I be okay with that? And you will get your answer whether 65 is good or 25 is good. It will show you how much money you could have lost, and that will tell you how much appetite of risk you can have in your portfolio. And I think once you know that appetite and once you have defined that asset allocation, then sticking to that asset allocation irrespective of how markets are going to go up or down is the key. And I think rebalancing brings that discipline to investors' portfolio. So every time, suppose, since you mentioned that potential case of a 50% equity, 50% fixed income portfolio, markets will go up 20%, 30%, 40%. Your 50 equity will become 60. that's the time you should be booking profits out of equities, to not say that we think markets are going to go down. I think the question is not about trying to time the market. The question is, I am comfortable with 50% of my portfolio at risk, because none of us know when markets can go down 10 or 20%. And I only have, as an investor, one needs to take that call, that I, as an investor, only have ability to see 5% downside in my portfolio or 10% downside in my portfolio. And that will help you decide how much part of your portfolio should sit in risky asset class as equity. Once you have decided that, every time market will take 50 to 60, you need to bring it down to 50. Every time market takes 50 down to 40, you should buy equities. And these are tough decisions to take. For example, March 2020, I'm using that because it's a very big correction month for Indian equities and global equities. It would have prompted you that right now your equity level has fallen below 50. You should be buying equities to take it back to 50, not asking you to take a judgment call on whether markets are further going to fall or further going to rise. We, basis what we have been seeing over the last 12, 13 years, since we have been managing these kind of portfolios, have seen that this simple discipline can add an additional 1% annualized return to your portfolio, much more than the fees that you will pay to an advisor to manage the portfolio. That's the kind of value add. And a lot of investors may feel 1% is no big deal, given now markets move 1%, 2% in a single day. But believe me, over years, and we have been seeing this over the last 12, 13 years, it's made an absolute dent of 50% additional return to investors than what investors would have otherwise got. So if you were otherwise going to make 350% return, this could have made sure that you made 400% return. That's the kind of effect this can have on your portfolio.
Yeah, but I think it's easier said than done. I'm just asking you practical questions on behalf of investor, and that's where your discretionary wealth would play, important. If you leave it on the investor to decide, nobody wants to, play with this bloody bar time, which is like your March 2020, where equity markets fell down by almost 27%. And as an investor, I'm saying, I'm talking about the behavior of any investor, including myself. Nobody wants to get into and buy equities those times. So how do you manage this situation? If you can share your experience.
So there, Vikas, I think, as I was mentioning earlier, discretionary portfolios come to the rescue. If you are going to allow that decision making to be with your wealth manager or your investment manager, they are going to not get biased. They are not going to get influenced by individual decision making. There will be an institutional process at play. They will make those decisions basis set principles of investing that the firm would have put in place. And that's going to ensure that you get the right decision at the right time. I think it's both which are equally important. Making the right decision and also making the right decision at the right time is equally important. And I think we have successfully been able to do that at Kotak, where we continuously keep emphasizing on this whole structured process of decision making. And of course, clients can benefit through that by actually just allocating money to one of those discretionary wealth management solutions.
Yeah, okay. Coming back to equities now, suppose we give a mandate to equities, and within equities now, you have to choose portfolio managers, because ultimately we want to give mandate to portfolio managers within equities. So one is that, for example, we at AIF and PMS Experts India follow this 3 I's framework. So the first, we look at the investment style. Second, we look at the investment portfolio. Third, we look at the investment performance, which is an outcome, basically, the consistency in terms of. But in your case, how do you give or how do you decide to give mandate to different portfolio managers within the overall equity scheme of things?
Yeah. So that, I think, is where the secret sauce lies. I think selection of fund managers is, of course, a very proprietary kind of a process, where we not only depend on quantitative parameters, we also spend a lot of time on our judgment, on our understanding of the styles of those respective managers. And that's the qualitative, experience based, intuition based aspect which comes to the table. So I would say, for investors, one important thing is to be guided by one such institutional advisor who will have a very strong, robust process to tell them which investment managers to take. Of course, you will look at all the basic quantitative parameters like rolling returns, Sortino ratios, Sharpe ratios, how much drawdowns those managers have taken. All of those quantitative parameters are important and relevant. But what is equally important is the experience of having known which managers have behaved how in the past and not just look at the data alone. The second part, I think, is a lot of time there is a tendency to look at more and more managers and keep adding more and more managers to your portfolio. And I think that's where I would like to bring the attention of investors to the fact that you need to identify maybe 3, 4, 5 high quality managers that you think fit your bucket. And of course, you can leave it to the institution who's advising you to make that decision for you, and just leave it at that, because both either over concentration or over diversification are bad for portfolio. I think over concentration can have the problems of very high volatility in the portfolio, because if you just go with 1 or 2 fund managers in your portfolio and those fund managers go through a bad performance patch for 2-3 years, it can significantly dent your portfolio. And similarly, if you were to go with too many managers, you will end up having a very diversified portfolio where there will be very little chance of generating outperformance against the market. In that situation, you might just as well go and buy the market ETF strategies or the Nifty ETF strategies. One more thing that we have seen in our cases, this whole concept of how people should go about choosing these managers should also be with the philosophy of defining managers who can withstand different market cycles. So there the philosophy of core managers is something that we advocate, saying that just don't go by manager who came into existence a couple of years back, has delivered great returns in the last 2 years. Don't get misguided by those kind of notions. Of course, you can make allocations to some of those strategies, but maybe more token allocations to experience them over longer periods of time. But managers who have seen cycles over longer periods are the managers that should be managing a majority part of your portfolio. That's why I'm calling them core managers. And that's how we look at those kind of managers who have been managing equities in India for 10 years, 15 years, maybe in some cases even more, and managers who have gone through different peaks and troughs of market, because those are the managers you can bet could possibly go through the same cycles of ups and downs even in the future. And I think that's very important. As far as underlying portfolios are concerned, I would say if investors are also looking at buying their own stocks, typically you can have between multiple managers and stocks that you pick for yourself. You could possibly have maybe anywhere between, give or take, 80, 100, 120 stocks in your portfolio, assuming each manager will bring 20, 25 stocks to your portfolio. But don't try to add too many managers where your number of stocks in your portfolio may become 200 or 250. I've seen that for some of the large family offices, large HNI investors, that they keep on adding fund managers through mutual funds, PMSs, AIFs, and the number of stocks in their portfolio completely balloon. In fact, within those 100 also, if I can take that as a number, you would typically have the top 50 stocks as your high bet stocks. And I'm right now talking about the underlying portfolio as a combination of stocks coming from fund managers as well as clients picking stocks themselves if they want to. But maybe the top 50 will really be the core of your portfolio, which is going to define your portfolio performance.
This is a very important point that you highlighted, Shobhit. In fact, we also manage some of the family offices, and my experience is just sharing with you. So, for example, there is a client who has invested in 2 different portfolio managers, and both of them follow GARP model. Now, so for him it is a diversification, but I know for the fact that it is a duplication, because 60-70% of the stocks are same. And at the same time, one point that you mentioned, Shobhit, is that some clients can manage buying their individual stocks in their own demat account and give some mandate to the portfolio manager. So my question, subsequent question out here is, how do you then say, for example, if you already have, say, growth in a style of portfolio manager, and let's say he end up buying Bajaj Finance, which is one of the fastest growing company in India, and then investor also likes to hold that stock. So how do you manage that situation as an advisor?
So there I would say, because that uh, it's nothing wrong if you are buying a particular stock which maybe two different advisors are advising, maybe it's only going to add to conviction on that particular stock. So I'm not so much against adding conviction in a particular stock, but again, I would give you an example. If you are a promoter of a company and you are holding, it's usually going to be the case that 70, 80, 90% of your wealth is going to be in that one company. But you know inside out of that company. You know exactly how the industry is behaving, you know how your sales are going to move, you know the nuts and bolts of the business. And then having 80, 90% of your wealth tied to that one specific stock is not a problem because you're completely into it. Think of it as an investor who's an outsider holding that company basis information that he gets to hear once every now and then from the company, typically once every quarter in the quarterly update, and he doesn't really know what's going inside the company. And that's where this whole concept of thinking like a promoter versus thinking like an investor comes in. And I think it's a very important differentiation for investors to note that if you are going to be thinking like a promoter, there is no problem in you holding concentrated positions in one specific stock. But if you are going to be thinking like an investor, then you will have to have the concept of diversification. You will have to limit what allocation can you hold for one specific stock so that you don't end up over diversifying or over concentrating your portfolio.
So the difference between success and failure is not which stock you buy. It's sort of diversification where your money is in which asset class.
Yes.
Absolutely, well said. So Shobit, the other thing is which is a debate which keeps going on, and of late it's happening a lot. It is always a discussion between active management and passive management. So, what's your thoughts on that?
So again, I think this is going to be the decade which is not going to end so soon. I think there will always be complementary value that both of these strategies are going to bring to an investor portfolio. We are increasingly of the belief, and I think again a trend that one has seen, whether it's in US or whether it's in Europe or whether it's in other parts of the world, that when it comes to large cap stocks, it is increasingly becoming clear that information is out there. There is very little that possibly a fund manager can know about the company which the market doesn't already know. And to that extent, since information is out there, market efficiency tells us that there should not be a possibility of a fund manager being able to generate outperformance. Of course, then there will be some star fund managers who will still be able to take a good judgment call on which business should they bet on. But when we look at mutual funds, a large number of them start to mirror what the index looks like, and there are relative overweight, underweight positions for a large number of funds. And there we feel that ETFs have a significantly big role to play, because ETFs also have come in various forms and shapes. And I think that's the part which can be used very well for investors to manage large cap part of their portfolio. When it comes to mid caps and small caps, of course, there is no doubt. I think fund managers, given that there is less coverage, given that there is less research which happens on those stocks, fund managers will always be able to use their own internal research to be able to take views on particular stocks which can benefit far more than what they can do in the large cap space. And I think if you even start to put trend to how Nifty performance has been versus large cap funds, you will see that the outperformance number is consistently decreasing. But you see the same trend for mid caps, you will see that the fund managers are significantly able to outperform what the index has done. So I would say we can't paint the city with the same brush. You have to look at it very selectively. For maybe large caps, you should still consider ETF strategies, and there are multiple different kinds of ETF strategies which can be considered. But for mid caps, small caps, definitely need fund managers to take those calls. Again, there will still be individual managers who one should not discount, who may be able to deliver returns even within large cap. So you'll have to again depend on your advisor to tell you and guide you how much part of your portfolio can be into passive strategies and what and which part of your portfolio can be managed by active strategies. It should not be that you should only have passives or you should only have active fund managers.
Yeah, well said. So Shobit, the risk is one of the thing which every client looks at. So how do you manage risk at your organization within the framework?
So because in our case, we actually divide risk into 4 buckets. We define risk as, of course, within equities, there is a risk from a market cap point of view, that how much large cap, mid cap, small cap should a portfolio have. Similarly, intuitively within fixed income, how much part of your portfolio is credit risk or duration risk, which is linked to what maturity bonds you are holding and how interest rates are going to impact. Those are, I think, risks which have been talked about much in the past, so I'll not spend more time on that. I think there are 2 other risk factors that we spend time on. One is concentration risk and one is liquidity risk. Now, each of these risks combined are what we define in the form of an investment policy statement for our investors, where we say that, like how when you run your company, you will possibly have a board resolution of your company. That board resolution will say what are the do's and don'ts that you can do within your company. So it's like defining the boundary conditions within which the company will operate. Similarly, for portfolios, and when portfolio sizes become large, they should be given the same seriousness the way someone will run his own business. That for a portfolio, there should be clear defined do's and don'ts, and within those do's and don'ts, I'm defining these underlying categories of risk. And there, for example, on concentration risk, we will put down guidelines, and that's how we manage portfolios when investors trust us to manage their money, that we define how much percentage of their portfolio can be into a single mid cap stock, how much percentage of their portfolio can be into a single small cap stock. Reason being, when it comes to mid caps and small caps, the amount of risk goes higher. You should not be having over concentrated positions in some of those stocks. Similarly, when it comes to liquidity, we are very mindful that the stocks that we buy for our investors, what percentage of the free float of that stock is traded in the market. It should not happen that when we are buying the stock price keeps on going higher, and on paper investor returns look great, but when it came time to sell the stock, there was no liquidity in that stock, and the stock were to be sold at a significant discount to what the paper price of that stock was. So we define each of these risk parameters very, very clearly, and it is all encapsulated in what we call as an investment policy statement, and that's what is used for us to control risk at a portfolio level.
All right, so with that, we'll open the forum for Q&A. In case anybody has any question, please type in your questions in Q&A box. So the last question from my side, Shobit. So you've been managing model portfolio for more than a decade now. So how it has fared in the long run, and any experience that you want to share with our investors?
So in our case, because our model portfolios have thankfully delivered consistent outperformance, and what we do is we don't just measure performance of last 12 months or last 24 months, because given the way markets are, as you rightly mentioned, today everyone and his performance will look great. But in our case, what we do is we look at returns on a rolling cycle, which means if you would have given us money anytime in the last 10 years, what would have been your average 1-year return or average 3-year return or average 5-year return? That's what we measure, because I don't know whether you came on 1st of April 2015 or 28th of March 2016 or some other date in 2017. So we measure our performance on a rolling return basis, and that rolling return for us has, for investors who have chosen to be more moderate profile, where we would say they typically have a 50% equity and a 50% fixed income oriented portfolio, our returns have been more like 11% per annum. To investors who have chosen to be as high as 80% equity, returns have gone to as high as 16% per annum. These are about 2 to 3% higher than what return investors would have made had they just parked that money in the underlying respective benchmarks of Nifty in case of equity and CRISIL bond index in case of fixed income. Having said that, of course, last couple of years have been great, and I think each of these 11% return has shot up to somewhere like 16% return. 16% return has shot up to like 21-22% return. So of course, last couple of years, those return numbers look even more sweeter, but I would still urge investors to look at longer term trends and know that uh, there are good 2-3% outperformance on returns that good advisors can bring to their portfolios.
Yeah, and I think it's not all about returns alone. It's about the risk also, the way it is being managed. So both
Absolutely.
coupled
So we
together.
actually measure our performance more on a risk-adjusted return basis. So when we show them returns, we also show them what risk we have taken to generate those returns. Of course, little more technical terms. We can discuss those with investors on a one-on-one basis. But things like Sharpe ratio are good ways for investors to know how much risk-adjusted return their advisors are generating, and I think that's something that we have successfully done for our investors.
According to you, what would be your advice to sophisticated investors? They should give mandate to advisors and allow them to manage, or they continue to manage their own and listen various advices from different people.
See, again, it's something that I very strongly feel about. So I would say it equally strongly. I think if investors want to manage a part of their portfolio by themselves, it's completely fine. But then they should spend enough and more time to understand that particular subject. For example, in current markets, we hear so many investors wanting to manage their own direct equity portfolio. I think it's perfectly fine. It can be a great way for them to experience markets firsthand. But then they should not just go by tips or go by what other friends or someone just giving them an idea is buying. They should try to get into details of it and manage it themselves. In fact, when we speak to many of these global wealth management firms who have been advising investors for 50 years, 70 years, across different generations, they tell us that investors have started to bifurcate their portfolio into two halves. One half is where investors say, I understand this subject and I'm going to do this myself. It could be direct equities for someone, it could be private equity for someone. And such has been the trend even in the startup space, right? Where a lot of people have said, I will bet on the new emerging businesses or new emerging promoters by myself and leave the rest of the portfolio to my wealth manager who can manage it on a discretionary basis. So it depends on how individuals feel comfortable. If they don't have time to depend upon managing their own portfolio, then they should leave everything to their advisors. If they have time on hand and they have the willingness to understand and get into details, then I think it's a good idea for them to keep a part of the portfolio to be managed by themselves, but get into the nitty-gritties of it in much more detail.
Last question, Shobit, what percentage to allocate to accredited or sophisticated investors product? The investor has experience with AIF and PMS, etc., but not sure how to set guardrails for this. So, what is your thoughts on that?
So again, I think it depends also on what kind of underlying investment one is looking at. If it is an open-ended fund, you may feel allocating much more percentage of your portfolio. Typically, we have seen investors look at 10% as a good thumb rule to make allocation to one particular investment. And it also ties in with the thought process that I said that they should not make 2% allocation to 50 different investments. It will lead to over diversification. So 10% kind of a number is a good thumb rule. But of course, it depends on what underlying options one is looking at. If there are close-ended options, you may look to allocate less because given when you would want to take an exit, there may not be an option. So you may want to restrict your allocations there. And again, depending on the asset class, if there is more fixed income oriented allocation, you may want to allocate a little higher. If it is more equity oriented allocation, you may want to keep it lower. But I would say maybe a very simple thumb rule could be more like a 10% allocation. If you really convinced about a particular investment option, that you could look to allocate your money to.
All right, Shobit. So with that, we'd like to conclude the session. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show, speak to our investors. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the participants who joined in today. I'm sure that you've got a lot of insights about how asset allocation plays very important role by generating the alpha. So thank you so much, and we'll conclude the session.
Thank you, Vikas.